Hello everyone, we are live now. Over to you, Hiroshi.
はい、本日は、弊社の、ウェビナーですね、セントアンドリュース大学の、ウェビナーにお越しいただきまして、本当にありがとうございます。本日の内容は、TESOL ですね、英語教授法に関するコースについて、セントアンドリュース大学より、イオンさんとジェーンさんにお越しいただいてますので、これから、TESOL のプログラムについてお話をしていただきます。質問等ありましたら、YouTube もしくは Zoom の、テキストボックスのから、ご質問をお願いいたします。Could you start your presentation?
ご紹介ありがとうございます。はい。Thank you. So my name's Owen Jordan, and I'm here to talk about the Masters in TESOL programs that we run at the University of St Andrews. So thank you very much to SI-UK for hosting us today, and we hope that the session is useful to you. I'll start just with some introductions. So my name's Owen Jordan. I'm the director of the International Education Institute at University of St Andrews, and that is the department that houses our Masters in TESOL programs. And I have one colleague with me today who's also going to contribute to this presentation. So Janie, can I ask you to do a quick introduction too?
Hi, so my name is Janie Brooks. I am the Program Director for the MSc TESOL. And so I look forward to talking to you a little bit later.
Great, thank you. So before we start to talk about the program specifically, I thought it would be useful to just give you a bit of background about the University of St Andrews as a whole, and the town of St Andrews too. So you can see on my opening slide here that there's a picture of the town of St Andrews, and you can see from that picture that St Andrews is a seaside town. We don't always have quite such beautiful weather as is on the slide, although we do have that today. And you can also see from the slides that it's quite a small town. In fact, the streets that you can see on the right-hand side of the picture, which leads to a ruined cathedral, that is one of three main streets in the town, and that really is the center of the town itself. It's three streets. It's a small community. The town has a population of around 15,000 people, and around 10,000 of those are students. So I think that is an important point to note about both the town and the university, that it's a small and tightly knit community. And community is very important to our programs, both for students who study with us on campus in St Andrews, and also those who study with us via distance learning as well. That community and being part of that St Andrews community is a very important part of the learning experience for us here. So why might you be interested in studying at University of St Andrews? So you can see some of the historical buildings here, but to just sort of quote something that's used often by our admissions office, we have this sentence which nicely encapsulates some of the attractive points about the university. So firstly, we are a highly ranked university. So if you were to look at the UK university rankings, there are three main rankings. And in all of those three main rankings, we are in the top three in the UK. And we have been for the past 4 to 5 years. In fact, in one of those sets of rankings, the Guardian rankings, we've been ranked second for the past 2 years after Oxford and Cambridge variously, depending on the year. And we've also been ranked in the top 100 QS universities for the past 10 years. So we're a highly ranked university, but also one that is steeped in tradition. And I think this is also another way of saying that we're a very old university. So the university was founded in 1413, which is so over 600 years ago. And over the course of that very long history, a lot of different traditions have emerged. So for example, students who study in St Andrews do things that perhaps most normal people would not necessarily want to do. Like there's a tradition to go swimming in the North Sea at dawn on May the 1st. It's called the May Dip, to bring good luck in exams. That's perhaps one of the more athletic traditions that has developed over the years. There are also some more academic ones too. So there's also a tradition of having academic families, whereby older or sort of undergraduate students who are further into their studies adopt a new student in terms of mentoring them and helping them through their studies. And I think that also, again, speaks to this importance of community in St Andrews. And the final part of this sentence talks about having a global outlook since its inception. So when the university was first formed and set up in 1413, it was set up by scholars across Europe who came together in St Andrews to establish Scotland's first university. And it was the third university in the UK, and indeed across the to be set up across the English-speaking world. So from its start, it was an international place. It was international at that time within the bounds of Europe, but that tradition of internationalism has carried right through to the present day, where we have a very large number of international faculty. And our student body is also very international. So around 45% of the students who study at St Andrews come from outside of the UK. So that's a bit about the university. Just bear with me a second. You might be able to hear my son laughing in the background. Just a second. Okay, sorry, we had a baby camera feed coming through into the room. But just to talk about the TESOL programs, so we offer a range of different postgraduate TESOL programs. And I think a key word about what we offer here, well, two key things are really about community, but also about flexibility here. And you can see some examples of the ways in which what we offer is flexible here. So these programs are relatively new. So we launched our current range of postgraduate TESOL programs in the 2019-20 academic year, so in September 2019. But they follow on from a previous English language teaching master's program, which we've been running since around 2005. So a few years ago, we stopped, looked, reviewed what we were doing on that program, made quite a number of changes, which we launched in 2019. And those changes are now sort of coming through to being in place for a couple of years. And we really feel that they've really added to the flexibility and the study experience for students that take the programs. So to go to that point about flexibility, we offer both on-campus and distance learning options is one obvious way in which there's flexibility with the programs. Those, while they're listed here as separate options, they're very much integrated in the way that students actually study. So from the new launch of these programs, our vision was that our distance learning students and our on-campus students would be studying together on modules. They'd be interacting through discussion forums, through other online activities as well, and they'd be benefiting from each other's different experiences and different backgrounds and different, in the case of distance learning students, different teaching contexts too. So we have different on-campus and distance learning options. I should say also we offer a range of different broad and specific qualifications. So you can choose to do an MSc TESOL, or you can also, which is the full master's degree in TESOL. You can also choose to do a postgraduate diploma in TESOL or a postgraduate certificate in TESOL. And that would be a fairly generic qualification. However, we're aware also that some students would like to specialize in particular areas which is also possible within that generic qualification, but would also like that to be reflected in the title of their degree program. And so we offer the chance for students to take a qualification of TESOL with a specialism in one of 5 different areas in which we offer specialist modules. So those are teaching young learners, English for academic purposes, English medium instruction, technology for teaching, and assessment and evaluation. So there are those 5 different areas in which you can specialize and also have that noted in your degree program title. The students that come to us and go through our programs, we have a real range of different students and people with different ambitions for after they've completed the program as well. I would say the majority are practitioners, people who want to move into or continue on a career of professional teaching or perhaps leadership and management as well in the area of TESOL. But we also have a significant minority of students who are taking a master's program with a view to going on to further doctoral level study as well. So that's what we mean here by a range of researcher and teacher profiles. And in terms of the entrance qualifications and experience that students have, we have a range here too. We accept students who are pre-service, who have not yet acquired teaching ability, teaching experience, if they are leaving their undergraduate studies with very strong academic performance, and we can see from their personal statements that this is a career path that they're really committed to. We also have students who have vast amounts of experience, 10, 20 years in some cases, and who also bring a very different perspective to discussions. And in fact, while this is quite a range of different perspectives, that has actually, I think, been very beneficial on our modules in terms of having a real diversity of opinions when students are discussing topics week by week on their discussion forums. I should also talk a little bit about the exact structure of the program. We'll talk in detail about some of the modules a little later on. But the structure of the program, if you're an on-campus student, is that you will come to join us in either September or January. And sorry, that's one further aspect of flexibility. The start date could be September or January. And in the first semester, if you're studying full-time on campus, you would take 4 15-credit modules with us. Then in your second semester with us, you would take another 4 15-credit modules. And then after that, you would move on to your dissertation. And that pattern holds whether you're starting in September or whether you're starting in January. So all of the taught modules that students take are 15 credits. When we relaunched this program, we restructured it so that these modules do not run for an entire semester. They're short and intensive. So a student taking 4 modules in one semester would do, during the first 5 weeks, they would take 2 modules side by side intensively, and they would have then the assessment for that. Then they would take another 2 modules side by side for the final 5 weeks with further assessment alongside that. This sort of is similar in some ways to the block approach to teaching that's been adopted by some other universities. So for example, in Australia, Victoria University has recently taken this approach where basically it reduces the number of subjects and areas students are focused on at one point in time. But it also serves to spread out assessment for students across the course, perhaps in a way that if everyone was taking 4 modules at a time, there would be a real bottleneck of assessment at the end of a semester. So that structure is 5-week intensive modules. An on-campus student would be studying 2 modules at one time. And if you're a distance learning student, typically, while there is some flexibility, but typically students are doing part-time and half the load. So a student would be studying one module at a time. So if you're a distance learning student, you would study 5 weeks on one module, interacting with both your fellow distance learning students and the on-campus students who are taking that module at the same time. And then you would move on to the next 5-week module in the semester. Then there's a break after the end of the semester, and you would start again in your following semester. So for a distance learning student, that track through the degree would involve typically covering 4 semesters and then moving on to the dissertation. So what makes the programs unique? So I've touched on some of these points already, but I'll come back to it to them as I refer to these 3 C's that we've listed out here, our core values of community, of practice, being connected globally, and also being very career focused. And I think those really speak to the main features of the program. So the first point to mention about community of practice, can look at it on a few different levels. So community is important to the learning experience we offer, and that is something that we've really invested in by ensuring that our on-campus and distance learning students study together on modules at the same time that they interact and they benefit from each other's expertise and opinions and different perspectives. And our community of students is quite diverse. So we have, at last count, at least 26 different nationalities represented within our current TESOL cohort across both the on-campus and distance learning groups. So students have fed back to us that this has been a really great experience to be able to get different perspectives, to kind of widen their own thoughts and mind on different ideas through interactions with these students. And it also provides a very good and useful global network for students in terms of learning about opportunities that might exist in different areas of the world too. So one aspect of this community is about the student community. However, we also regard our master's students as being part of in the International Education Institute's wider community of learning and teaching enhancement, or enhancement of learning and teaching practice. So within the Institute, we, for example, have guest speakers who come to talk on issues of concern to teaching to our teaching staff. And we also run an annual English for Academic Purposes conference that's been into its 10th year this year. And that's quite a major event in the annual calendar for English for Academic Purposes in the UK. Both of these are things that staff are strongly encouraged to engage in, but also we very strongly encourage our master's students to be involved with these too. So master's students are invited to our guest presentations that when we bring in guest speakers. We also invite the master's students to our EAP conference. And in fact, we do more than that. We support them and strongly encourage them to deliver presentations, normally poster presentations, at that conference. And the feedback we've had from previous students who've done that has been incredibly positive. I think for some of them, it's really acted as a springboard to help them begin and move on to present at other conferences and events and build their confidence in that area in terms of sharing knowledge with other teachers, with other practitioners. So community is important, and that community is about students, but it's also about students and staff. And I think the final point I would note on this, about the community is that our staff also have a very wide range of professional experience. If you look on the website, I think we've listed out a range of different countries, including Japan, China, various Middle Eastern countries, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, Thailand, all sorts of areas where staff have taught, worked for either non-governmental organizations or universities, held leadership roles, but have a good knowledge of TESOL and job opportunities in those areas. And this is also a resource we aim to use to help students when they're thinking about what their next steps are after their programs. So in terms of whether that is further study or whether that's employment, we have a good wide experience base on which we can support students. The next point about being connected globally, so I've already alluded to the fact that our student body has over 26 nationalities represented in it, and our staff also have a very wide range of experience in different areas of the world, including Japan. So that is something that provides a kind of useful global network for our students in terms of helping them to identify both opportunities for professional work and career opportunities, but also potentially for research and collaboration too. And the final point here is about being career focused. So the program, the way we've designed it, the modules we have, the program learning outcomes are very much focused on what a student will need to do as a teaching practitioner after graduation, as a teaching practitioner, and also taking on leadership roles within an organization. So that has really been a driving force behind the design of the program. And we also very strongly encourage students right from the start to be thinking about their career path after graduation. So, you know, in terms of mapping out a path of study, we want students to be moving on to do their dissertations in areas that not only are of interest to them, but also are areas of research that they will then be able to use when it comes to looking for a job or looking for a further study opportunity, and be able to demonstrate how this is directly relevant and will help them in that opportunity. One part of that support, starting from the very start of the program, that we offer in terms of helping students to adapt to their studies, but also think ahead to their careers, is a set of optional sessions that we deliver called Professional and Academic Literacies. I think I'm right in saying that PALS is the acronym we use. And that's something that Janie leads on as the program director for the TESOL programs. So I'm going to hand over to her now to talk a little bit about that before moving on to look at the different modules that we offer on the program. So Janie, can I hand over to you?
Okay, thank you very much, Owen. So in terms of the PAL strand that we offer, so this is a set of optional workshops. Some of them are delivered live, but all of them are recorded, so students can choose when to access the sessions. In these workshops, we look very much in the first semester at the academic skills that you might need to develop in order to be successful on our program. And so we look at a whole range of areas, for example, how to read academic papers, how to maybe write the different types of assessments that we have on the program. And so, for example, writing a rationale, writing an explanation of why you've made certain decisions is an important type of writing to be able to do well on our program, because much of our work looks at connecting theory with practice and then using that theory to explain why we've made certain decisions. And so the PALS sessions, the PALS workshops are really focused on the different types of writing and speaking that you might need to do to be successful on the program. And obviously these skills are transferable to a future context, whether you become a researcher or whether you choose to become a teacher. In the second semester, we move far more to a careers focus. And so, for example, at the beginning of the semester, we will make sure that you have a really good understanding of how our careers service works at the university, but we'll also start to develop some of your career skills. And so, for example, drawing on some of the work that you've already done on your modules, will help you to, for example, build an online portfolio, which you can share with a future employer. And will also help you to develop the elements that you're going to put within that folder. So, for example, a CV, maybe which outlines your teaching philosophy. So, as I say, in doing this, we're drawing on lots of different work that you've already done on the program. So that's just one of the ways in which we seek to help you develop your future career. So I'll now move on to give you an overview of the modules that you're likely to study. And to start with, I'm just going to have a look at the compulsory modules. So as Owen has already explained, the program is designed so that you have 5 compulsory taught modules, and these are followed by a dissertation. So just to give you a flavour of what each module looks at, the first one listed on this screen on the slide, the Action Research for Teachers, this module aims to really help you connect between theory and practice. And so on this module, you will study different ideas, different concepts related to action research and also to reflection. But the module's very practical. You will apply these ideas to a scenario which you've chosen for yourself. So you will decide on a particular teaching context, and then you will think about making decisions in this teaching context. And at the end of the module, you'll produce a report in which you reflect on the decisions that you've made. One important outcome here is that you will have a statement about your teaching philosophy, about your teaching values. And this is clearly something that you might want to draw on when you are talking to a future employer. In the language teaching methodology module, you will focus on all of the theories that underpin contemporary teaching methodologies. So you'll examine how those theories can be applied to practice. And again, the outcome or the assessment for this module will encourage you very much to focus on a theory that you've chosen, one that you find interesting and somehow want to connect with your future practice. And in the assignment, you explore the strengths and the weaknesses of this theory precisely by applying the theory to a teaching context of your choice. So again, as you can see, our program is very much about connecting theory and practice. So at the end of the program, our hope is that you feel able to go into a classroom and make theory-informed decisions about your teaching. But as language teachers, actually understanding the nuts and bolts of the language, how it works, is very important. And so the third compulsory module is Linguistics for language teachers. So this module doesn't assume that you've had any prior study of linguistics, although if you have, there are lots of parts within the module which will stretch your current understanding, your current knowledge. And so in this module, you learn to analyze language, whether it's written language or spoken language. So at the end of the module, one of the outcomes is that you feel able to approach a text and to describe it, to understand it, to see how it works, but also so that you have the technical language to talk about language. You have the technical language to actually go and access research about the English language and again, be able to apply it to your practice. So during this module, you learn some very useful and practical skills. For example, how to use a corpus in order to answer questions that you might have about language, but also how to use a corpus within your teaching. So in this module, you have sessions where you prepare lessons or rather segments of lessons. So this is a micro teaching scenario, and you teach these sections of lessons to your peers, to the other students, and then reflect on what you've learned from this. So again, we've got this this connection between theory and practice, and explored in quite a practical way. Moving on, in the second language acquisition module, here you really study in depth theories which have developed over time to think about how learners learn. What's the process that they go through? And so here you study a range of different theories, and at the end of this module, you then start to think about, okay, if the theories explain how language is learnt in general by learners, in the final section of the module, you go into much more detail about how the individual characteristics of a learner will also influence their learning process. And again, in this assessment for the module, you write an essay, you get a range of essay choices so that you can specialize in an area that you're particularly interested in. And in that essay, you're encouraged to connect between the different theories that you're interested in and, again, practical applications in teaching. Moving on to the teaching and researching module, this module plays a particular role within the program. So it's designed to help you acquire some of the key skills which are needed to make that transition from undergraduate studies to master's studies. And so one of these, a very important one of these, is how to read the research literature in a critical manner. And so here you will look at how to judge quality in a piece of research, both from a philosophical point of view and from a practical point of view. And so the assessment for this module is actually assessing the value of 3 different pieces of research which are on a similar topic. And so this module is very practical in terms of preparing you to carry out your own research in the dissertation module. So as Owen mentioned, the compulsory modules are 5 weeks long. The dissertation module is slightly different. So this generally lasts around about 12 weeks. And with the support of your supervisor, you will go into some depth in an area of TESOL that you're very interested in. As Owen's mentioned, very often our students choose subjects which are related to their future career path. And in so doing, students very often produce a piece of work which will help them some way in their future career. So some students, maybe who've been sponsored by their school, will produce a piece of research which then will feed back into improving practice within their school. Students who've had little teaching experience before will often choose an area to really develop and hone their understanding. So again, very often seeking to make a practical application. So the dissertation is a really important part for our students to develop their own interests, but there's plenty of support on offer during the dissertation period. And so, for example, you get the chance to attend a writer's retreat where you, excuse me, actually produce the first draft of your literature review chapter. And very much in line with the rest of the program, you draw on feedback from your fellow students and from lecturers to actually improve that first draft. And so, as I say, you'll probably carry out, many of our students actually collect their own data and produce some very interesting insights into language teaching. So the lecturers are often very excited at the dissertation stage because the students will often cover a huge range of topics. So that just gives you a little bit of insight into the dissertation. So I'm now going to hand back to Owen, who's going to talk to you about the optional modules.
Thank you, Janie. So I will now talk a little bit about the optional modules, and then after that, we'll be returning to one of those compulsory modules Janie mentioned, one which she coordinates action research, and she'll be giving you a slightly more in-depth presentation about that particular subject area. But in terms of the optional modules, so there are 5 we offer in total, and you can see the note on the screen that students select 3 of these 5 if they're doing a full master's program. That is in the scenario that a student is doing the generic MSc TESOL program. They have free choice, or almost free choice, of these 5 different modules. If someone is doing a program which is, for example, MSc TESOL with a specialism in assessment and evaluation, that will no longer be an optional module, that will be compulsory. The assessment and evaluation module will be compulsory, and they'll have 2 choices from the remaining modules. And so that applies to all of the 5 different specialisms which align with these 5 optional modules. One thing I should note is, because of the way that we schedule these modules, and we are committed to ensuring that students take modules in a defined set of time, because it really does build that community learning experience, which we wouldn't get if we sort of scheduled things very flexibly. It does mean there are some choices that need to be made here. So, for example, it's not possible to study both English for academic purposes and teaching young learners on a program if you're on campus, and to do that as a distance learner may mean a slight adjustment to your study schedule. And then again, for the on-campus students, they'd be expected to choose 2 out of the 3 modules of assessment and evaluation, English medium instruction, and technology for teaching. There is, again, a bit more flexibility if you're a distance learner, although it may require sort of adjustment to your study schedule over time. Just to talk briefly about the nature of some of these modules before handing back to Janie. Following on from some of the comments she's made about the core module, the assessment on all of these tends to be very much encouraging you to apply theory to a practical situation. So, for example, the assessment and evaluation module, a key component of the assessment you would do there is critiquing an actual assessment, either from a context that you're familiar with, or we also can supply past papers and so on that would be critiqued using a theoretical framework, and with suggestions for potential enhancement there as well. The English for academic purposes module, to pick out another example, involves assessment which would be partly a presentation and partly designing a specific EAP workshop and providing an additional rationale for the design of that workshop. So again, it's not about just writing a theoretical essay to give a viewpoint on something. It's about taking theory and applying it to produce a practical product, which is something that you may need to do in your professional lives, either at present or in the future. The Teaching Young Learners module requires students to produce a portfolio of different lesson plans with an accompanying rationale. And then the Technology for Teaching module gives a focus to students where they need to work together in groups. In fact, let me just pull that up because I was just looking at this. So whereby students need to give a presentation about how they would solve a particular problem in teaching using technology, and then also have an accompanying rationale to go with that. And in fact, on that module, students are working together in groups, developing their educational technology usage leading up to that assessment. The one I didn't mention there was about English medium instruction. So that is a more essay-based assessment, but also students, as is the case across all of the modules, they're assessed in part on their forum participation and interaction with other students during the course of the module as well. So that's a fairly brief overview, but I hope that you can get a sense of the fact that the modules themselves have been designed in terms of their titles, in terms of their focus and their assessments on actual practical applications of theory. And the theory obviously is taught as part of the module with a focus on application, not just research into a particular theoretical area. So I'm going to move on now, and in fact move back to one of the core modules which forms part of the program, which is action research for teachers. And this is really, I think, core to what we do, both as educators in the International Education Institute and in terms of the approach that we want to instill in our master's students and postgraduate diploma and certificate students too, in terms of how they go on and how they have impact on their own and colleagues' practice in the future. So Janie is going to talk, I think, for around 10 minutes on this topic, and then we're going to have a bit of time at the end for questions and answers. So I'll hand over to Janie now, and then after that return for the question and answer session.
Okay, so thank you very much, Owen. If we could just move to the next slide, that would be great. So what I hope to do in the next 10 minutes is just to give you a flavour of an action research lecture. So to start off with, I'd really like you to think about, imagine the situation that, excuse me, you're at the end of your teaching day, you've just taught your last lesson, and you're going back to your office. And in this situation, typically teachers start to ask questions about that last lesson. So I'd like you just to think for a moment about what questions do you think teachers ask at that moment once they've just moved out of the classroom and they're walking back maybe to their office or to their staff room. Okay, thank you, Owen, if you could just, thank you. So were these some of the questions that you thought about? Often in our teaching, we're working in classrooms which are very complex environments. And as we're teaching, an unexpected event happens and we have to make that on-the-spot decision about what to do. When we leave the classroom, we often then start to reflect, was that the right decision? Could I have done that in a different way? Might I have got a better outcome? In fact, thinking about things, are there other things that I should try out that I should maybe do differently? We might also ask about what went well and think about, okay, so that went well, so I want to build on that and build on my practice and use that in other lessons. But often we come back to this question about why did that happen? How could I do it better? How can I improve my students' experience of learning? Thanks, Owen. So where can teachers find answers to their questions? Well, you could, as a teacher, walk back to your staff room and ask your colleagues. And what we know about colleagues is that they're often very, very enthusiastic about helping us. So very quickly, they will have moved from the question that we've had to their solution to it, and they'll share their best advice with us. We could also ask our learners, we could talk to our pupils or our students and ask them what their experience is. And often learners are very happy to explain to us how they feel about being in our classrooms, and that information can also help us make better teaching decisions. Alternatively, we can turn to the research literature. We can see what researchers can tell us about how to answer a particular question. But all of these things by themselves are a little bit problematic. When we talk to our colleagues, they help us solve our problem or answer our question rather than necessarily than making us actually look at the question from a number of different perspectives. Our learners are often really willing to help us when we ask them questions, but do they always tell us how they're experiencing our lessons in full detail? Often they want to please us as their teachers, and so maybe just relying on learners' information might mislead us. If we look at the research literature, here we've got maybe ideas for answers to our questions, but they're developed by researchers who are looking to find generalized answers. And maybe in these answers, they don't quite meet the needs of our particular teaching context. They don't respond to our particular students. And so although all of these methods in isolation are useful, they don't necessarily help us to solve puzzles or questions or simply answer interests that we've had in the context of our own classrooms. Thanks, Erin, if you can. So what can we do? Well, one response to this is to look to action research. And you might be thinking, so what is action research? So here, it's a way of reflecting on your teaching. And this is probably what you were doing as you walked away from that last lesson. But the difference with action research and how it can help us is that we systematically find answers to that question. We collect data from our classroom. We maybe will talk to our colleagues and here use different information, including data from our students, to have a moment where we analyze that data. So using this data-driven approach, which we place within a systematic framework, this allows us maybe to make decisions that we wouldn't have been able to do if we had either talked to our colleagues or talked to our students or looked at the literature. It's through combining all of these different methods within a systematic process, which helps us maybe to really make progress with developing ourselves as teachers and developing our practice. Thanks, Owen. So on the slide, what I'm showing here is just a generalized view of the action research cycle. And you'll notice that there are two really striking features. Firstly, you have this notion of a cycle. So you'll see that the action research process is cyclical, and we go through these 4 stages of reflecting, planning, acting, and observing, and then start the next cycle. So here you can see that the emphasis is always on continual improvement of our teaching practice, continual improvement of maybe not just our teaching practice, but of some element within our learning environment. The other thing you'll notice, as I say, the second feature is this very strong notion of making progress. So here, the emphasis is very much on taking micro steps, and at each step, we're somehow developing our practice, developing our understanding of our teaching environment. So here, we're generating knowledge about our particular teaching context, our particular classroom, with our specific students. And this type of knowledge maybe is the most easy to actually apply in order to improve our practice. Thank you, Owen, if we can. So moving on, it's useful just to think about what some of the key characteristics of action research are. As I've already alluded to here, we're collecting data in situ. We're actually conducting this research within our own classroom. And so here, the knowledge that we produce is knowledge which is really connected with our classrooms. We have a really practical focus because we're looking at answering questions that we have generated ourselves about our own practice. And this leads us to make changes, to take actions to improve our practice. So as a teacher, we become researchers of our own classrooms, but also researchers of our own practice. And very often in action research, we don't only change our actions, but we become different teachers. And through this, we actually have a sense of developing as professionals. So as I've said, we do this by focusing very much on our practice. We may actually produce some theory as almost like a side effect of our research, often when we've been carrying out action research projects for a while. But the main focus is really on improving our practice, improving our students' experience of our classrooms and learning in our classrooms. So one of the other characteristics is that action research projects are quite dynamic. We're constantly cycling between these 4 main steps. And so in so doing, I think it really engages teachers. They really start to notice far more that's going on in their classroom. And so teaching becomes a different experience. Action research almost always involves collaboration, both with your learners, with your students, with your pupils, but also maybe with your colleagues. And so here you're actually using both to question your judgments, to challenge any assumptions that you're making. And so at the end of this process, you are creating what we could call contextualized knowledge. You are building knowledge about your practice in your classroom, your learner's experience. And so here, this type of knowledge maybe is the type of knowledge which, as I say, will help you develop as a practitioner. And so action research can be incredibly invigorating and exciting experience for the teacher, who, as I say, then becomes a teacher researcher. Thanks, Owen, if we could move on. So how does action research then differ from just the everyday practice, the everyday actions of teachers? Well, as I've already mentioned, it's more systematic and it can often be far more collaborative. It's really focused on improving. So you're not looking for problems in your classroom. You're really very much focused on improving the experience of your learners, improving the efficiency of their learning. So here you get a chance to pick an area, to select something that you're interested in, and to actually then expand your interest in this. And so the teacher is very much at the heart of this research process. And in so doing, it allows you to have or to develop different understandings of teaching, different understandings of learning. And so here, rather than rushing to your next lesson, it gives you an opportunity to really delve into your teaching philosophy, the things that you believe, and to challenge them and to maybe change them, evolve as a teacher. Okay, thanks, Aaron. So you might be interested in the history of action research. In fact, it's got quite a long-standing history, and many action researchers would maybe trace it back to the early 1900s and the work of Dewey, an American educational philosopher of sorts. So Dewey's contribution, I think, was to put science at the heart of looking into classroom research. And so he argued that this type of inquiry involves both common sense, but also a scientific approach. So building on this, in the 1930s and 1940s, a social psychologist called Lewin actually coined the phrase action research. So Lewin was very interested in how research itself had to take action. And he said that there was no research without action. And so in his approach to action research, the question that you were researching into and then the action that you would take to address this question became connected. And so this was Lewin's, well, one of Lewin's main contributions to the development of action research. In the 1950s, Corey actually introduced this into schools, and it became a resource that teachers could draw on to explore their classroom practice. But it started to fall out of fashion maybe because of 2 main reasons. Firstly, there was this question over whether teachers could actually be researchers. And so it was maybe considered that it wasn't appropriate for the teachers to carry out research. And the second thing was also that action research doesn't produce generalizable results. It's about a specific classroom. It's about specific learners with a specific teacher. However, later on, towards the end of the 20th century, it became clearer and clearer how much value action research actually has for teachers. And so action research became part of teachers' continual professional development in many circumstances, but it also became a key area on many teacher education programs. And so it's very fitting that we have this on our MSc in TESOL. So you might be wondering what the current standing of action research is, given that in the 1950s it had a moment of popularity and then became less popular. So we can see at the moment that it's become accepted as an established research methodology, and indeed it's possible to do a dissertation using action research as your methodology. So if you look in the methodology textbooks for education, action research now finds their place within those books. We can see a proliferation of action research projects being carried out both by academics and practitioners in many, many different disciplines. So for example, law and medicine, development studies. So action research is not just something which is carried out in an educational context. We can also see that action research has an international standing because of the number of peer-reviewed journals which are dedicated to it. And so, for example, you can see on the slide that there are many, many different action research journals, including one based in Asia. So moving on, I think it's fair to say that we can see action research in many different ways. And these are my two probably preferred definitions. And I think this idea of action research being simply practice changing practice is very appealing to teachers working in many, many different contexts. So on the next two slides, I've just summarized action research and given some references, but I think what we'd like to do now is to turn the session over to you and try and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. はい、それではですね、今から、質問のコーナーに入っていきたいと思います。はい、so I'm gonna read out the questions.
I can see actually there's one here already about, is it possible to take more than 5 modules in the chat box? So I can perhaps answer that. So I think the 5 modules being referred to are either the compulsory modules or the optional modules that I listed. So just to talk first about the number of modules students do take, a student doing a full master's program would take 8 modules. A student doing a postgraduate diploma would also take 8 modules. The difference being they wouldn't do a dissertation afterwards. And a student taking a postgraduate certificate course would do 4 modules. Our experience with the students doing the full master's program is that they don't really have time to take more than the 8 modules they already do. There will obviously be 2 optional modules they don't take, but they are busy. It's you know, these are intensive modules, and it's an intensive program. I guess if the question is, can you access resources from other modules? This is perhaps a slightly tricky area for us for a couple of reasons. One is that, for example, if we have a postgraduate certificate student, in the past, we have had students who've done a postgraduate certificate and then moved on to take other modules and do a master's program. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to share a whole module with a student in the knowledge that in some cases, in fact, in a fairly significant number of cases, a student may then go on and take that module again later on. The other, I think, problematic aspect for us is that the modules are not just a collection of video lectures from lecturers. There's a lot of input from the lecturers, and there's also a lot of discussion and interaction with students and between students, which is on the Moodle pages that host the different modules. In terms of us protecting the confidentiality of that information for individual students, that's something that individual students on the module will have access to and teaching staff would have access to, but we wouldn't just grant access to that sort of personal student data to a student who, without sort of going through a process of checking that was appropriate, because unless they're not part of the actual module. So I guess the short answer is, if there was something that someone's particularly interested in, if there was a topic, let's say, that formed part of the English medium instruction module that a student who's not taking that module was very interested in, by all means, we would be happy to share the relevant video lecture or you know, perhaps set of citations or piece of text or whatever it is. But and that's easily done, but we wouldn't typically give students just access to a whole module that they're not enrolled on for those issues to do with protecting actual student privacy and data, and also because students may then go on and take that module in the future as well, which are really the two impediments. But I guess, you know, if let's say if you're a student who's taken a full master's program, you took all 8 modules in the program and there were 2 other ones you wanted to take. One option we may offer in the future is to be able to students to enroll on an individual module and just take that. That's not something we advertise at the moment, but it is something we are likely to be able to offer if someone wanted to do that. And also we are likely to be launching a professional doctorate in TESOL program within the next few months, during which a student who's done our master's program already would be able to then take some of those modules that they actually weren't able to take during the program. So I guess whole modules we can't just give access to students to audit, but we can give selective information if it's of particular interest to students. So thank you, student B, for the question.
Thank you very much for answering your questions. And then actually, I have one question from YouTube about scholarship. Is it possible for you to answer scholarship information?
Yeah, I can give you some information about that, yeah.
Okay, so this student is asking if they have a high IELTS score or high academic record. Is it possible for you to give any scholarship to international students?
So we have, there are several scholarships that are relevant to the postgraduate TESOL programs, and there may be more that come online over the next, for the next cycle, the next academic year. Most of these are scholarships that are relevant to a range of postgraduate taught programs, so a range of master's programs. So there's, for example, there's a Santander scholarship, which is open to students across any master's program. And that is something that can be applied for directly through the university's postgraduate scholarships page. There's a whole list of different scholarships there. Some of them are limited by country, some of them are limited by subject, but there are quite a few that are just open to any subject, any area. So each year, just to explain the process of that, if a student applies for that, we will then receive a list of the scholarship applicants, which we evaluate. And of course, if a student in particular has a very strong academic record, and for this program, if they have really interesting work experience that would contribute to their learning and is relevant to the program as well, those are things we would regard very highly. I think when it comes to evaluating a scholarship application, the IELTS or English language test score is less of a concern, but certainly we would look at the academic and the other work experience that a student has. So I'm happy to share in the chat, I'll just look it up, the link to the postgraduate scholarships page so that you can see the list of everything that's available, and I'll post that in the chat in just a minute. And I should add, I mean, we do have one scholarship specific to our distance learning program, which you may find if you look through the list of scholarships. However, that is specifically targeted at refugees and asylum seekers based in the UK in terms of widening access to them. So that wouldn't be something typically that a student from Japan would be able to apply to.
Okay, thank you very much for answering the question. And then actually, we are running out of time. So yeah, so I have to close this webinar. So thank you very much for giving your presentation today. And then, I will, if I get any questions from students, I'm gonna follow up the student, and then I might contact you to answer the question, to get the answer from you. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much for that. Also, just to let you know, I've shared the scholarship information link in the chat, just so that you have that.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's been great to talk with everyone today.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting us, and apologies for running slightly over time with our presentation.
That's no problem. Thank you very much. はい。今日は、セントアンドリュース大学の TESOL のウェビナーにご参加いただきましてありがとうございました。またですね、ご質問等ありましたら、SI-UK 東京オフィスか大阪オフィスの方にですね、ご連絡いただけましたら、私の方でですね、ご質問をさせていただくことが可能ですので、またお気軽にお問い合わせいただけたらと思います。はい。Thank you very much for your presentation. And then I hope we will see you in the fair day.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.